Good evening, friends. On the platform of Spiritual Doctors for Holistic Health, we again welcome you on this Sunday evening for a interesting talk on consciousness-based healthcare, conscious healthcare by a radiologist physician from Canada, Dr. Mitch Abrams. I watched his video on science of consciousness long time ago, and after watching that video I felt that I need to contact this man. I need to invite this fellow on our platform, what he's doing right now. All creative people, all spiritual people keep doing new things, keep exploring consciousness. So what is this doctor is doing these days? So I approached through LinkedIn, and he gets fully connected so swiftly. And after little bit of conversation, chat, I came to know that he's fan of Dr. Amit Goswami as well as Dr. Evan Alexander. And more than that, he's fan of India. He has visited India so many times for the purpose of attending Vipassana or for visiting. There's one school of inspired leadership. Since 2016, he's coming India almost every year, except this lockdown period of the lockdown. And a person who understands consciousness. Consciousness is not just fundamental, but consciousness is primary. And if we can integrate in our healthcare, then we can't imagine how the quality of healthcare is going to improve. In mainstream, it's still not popular, but it's our effort at Spiritual Doctors for Holistic Health, an effort of people like Dr. Mitch Abrams, that we are going to use this consciousness healthcare very soon. So before bringing Dr. Mitch Abrams in front of you, let me introduce a little bit about him. He is based in Canada, Toronto, and there he is assistant clinical professor in Michael D. Groot School of Medical Science, McMaster University, Toronto, and he's also leading one social project with the name Next Gen Health. We will listen about it today, what's it and how we can take benefit from this project. And we will also come to know the Global Coherence project. It's very interesting. You are going to love it. So welcome, Dr. Mitch Abrams. Welcome on Spiritual Doctors for Holistic Health. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ranjan and Dr. Sandeep. It's an absolute joy, and I feel so grateful and blessed to be able to be here with you and share, learn, and heal with you all in your community. So what I've done for our conversation, I'm a radiologist, so I'm a very visual person. So I created a little PowerPoint, a little presentation for you all. So give me one moment. I'm going to share my screen with you.
For starting the PowerPoint presentation, some informal conversation, Dr. Mitch, that you started consciousness exploration before your medical studies, or you in later years you got acquainted with consciousness?
The whole idea of consciousness for me really came about much later on in my life, once I was practicing, and it's very much kind of part and parcel with kind of this healing journey that I've endured. And I can tell you, starting in medical school, this was not even a thought. In fact, we would have a couple of, classes in medical school over our 4 years talking about the importance of self-care and connection. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And I kind of laughed it off and didn't pay any attention to it. But it has become something I'm, very passionate about, and has completely changed my life and how it's informed my perspective of medicine and the future of healthcare. So I do share a little bit of my journey and how I've come to this point to now connect with all of you. And before I get into that, let me just share with you a few objectives that I just want to meet out of this program. So first objective is I would like to introduce to you kind of this interesting intersection between science and spirituality, and really try to build off of what Dr. Eben Alexander was chatting about a few weeks ago when he was discussing the concept of one mind, that spiritual oneness. And secondly, I would like to create this video as an opportunity for you not only to expand the perspective of consciousness, but so that you can share this not only with colleagues, but with your patients. It's important that we start engaging in these conversations directly to our communities, because it's part of the process of strengthening and building health, not just for individuals, but for our communities. And lastly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce to you a concept that local is global and how we could actually achieve that. So before I get into anything, let me just share with you a little bit about who I am and my journey. I was born in the East Coast of Canada. I was pretty happy child. And fast forward a few years, and I went to medical school. And this story really starts right when I graduated from my residency. I was one of those residents after 20 years of study. I was completely burned out. I was exhausted, and here I was now starting my own independent medical practice. And it was at that point in my life where I also got diagnosed with a heart condition that required open heart surgery. And in this moment, it really kind of shifted my life, put me on a completely different trajectory. I got to experience our healthcare model from a completely different side. And interestingly, as I bounced back to work, shortly after that, I was appointed as a chief of my department. So very quickly did I get to experience our entire healthcare model from the top up and bottom up and top down, and realize that our healthcare model is so outdated. Even how we define and study health and wellness was so narrow in scope. And after my experiences, it was hard for me to really, put my finger on the pulse as to what it was, but it was lacking something fundamental. And I was really disillusioned at this point after getting to experience medicine from both sides. And during this entire time, there was another kind of, another element that came into my life, into the mix. And that was, interestingly, the days before being told I was going to go in for heart surgery, for whatever reason, I decided I was going to buy my first guitar. And at that point, music entered my life. And through this whole process of healing, music became a very big part of my healing process, and even just reinvigorating passion. And during this whole time, when I began to appreciate the gaps within our healthcare model and really questioning the system and really feeling even just burnt out from years of study, I became interested to look at other models and became interested in looking at other approaches to health and wellness. And in my journey of life, opportunity came to visit India. And it was such a magical trip. This was actually dating back to, I believe, 2014. And on this trip, I made beautiful lifelong friends and had experiences that, again, were these life-changing, life-altering moments of learning and, personal awareness. And in this beautiful trip, one of the magical moments that occurred was I found myself at a wedding. And at this Indian wedding, I met this gentleman, Anil Sechev. And Anil was actually the father of the bride. And, meeting this gentleman for the first time at this wedding, it was obvious how kind and generous he was. But there was something about him, like, very energetic. And I come to learn that, Anilji he was the founder of a school of inspired leadership. And it was a business school that's discussed and taught how to create strong leaders that had a higher level of awareness, understanding the importance of mindfulness, and creating balance, compassion, appreciating the power of diversity, and applying ethics in everything that you do, and how to take these core values to create healthy, thriving communities. And as through this blessing of meeting, I had opportunities to continually reconnect with the School of Inspired Leadership. And, my growth and my healing was so much tied in to what I was learning through this kind of new lens of appreciating the power of community and connection. And one of the interesting symposium that the School of Inspired Leadership put on was the World Leadership Dialogue. And I found it fascinating that Anil had brought together, the top CEOs of corporations, politicians, top educators, and we were discussing the power of spirituality, the Bhagavad Gita, and how to apply these spiritual ancient wisdoms into politics, into business, into education. And through these experiences, I began to truly appreciate the spiritual science. It was a true science. And not only did I get to see how it would transform, organizations and employees, reinvigorate their passions, but I also had opportunities to visit the poorest of poor villages to see how they were working with a number of NGOs to help support back communities and help them rise. And so this journey was amazing and made just amazing friends. And, it was just such a heart-opening time in my life. And what I found fascinating was that many of these spiritual practitioners and communities I was connecting with, many of them had such a profound understanding in the laws of physics and in science. And it just bewildered me as to why in the world would, a spiritual master in the Himalayas, why would there be of any interest in Western science and physics? And it was explained to me that, and just as Einstein said, everything is energy. Your thoughts, your emotions, your consciousness, these are forms of energy. The more that we understand energy, the more you can understand your thoughts, you can understand your consciousness, and then begin to use them as tools for health and wellness. Now, this was my light bulb moment because my field and my specialty in medicine is very unique. We don't use scalpel blades or prescription pads in radiology. We use the power of energy, our profound understanding in the laws of physics, to essentially use machines like an MRI scan or a CAT scanner to slice the human body like a loaf of bread and look inside every slice. The fact that we can non-invasively dissect physical bodies is purely because everything is energy. You, me, everybody in this world, we are made up of cells, and those cells are made of molecules, which are made of atoms, which themselves are vibrations of light. They're purely light beings. And for me, who was, kind of starting, not only experiencing the power of the spiritual science as I began to study and practice, but, here it is starting to look at it from, my left side of my brain, understanding that neuroscience and the clinical emerging research is starting to show us the power of these techniques. I realized that there was a definite intersection with the spiritual scriptures, Bhagavad Gita, and talking about light and life force and energy is the same energy that we're using in radiology. So at a certain point, I realized that I wanted to begin sharing this knowledge and this perspective and what I was experiencing in our healthcare model or into life. And one opportunity that arose was I noticed that our staff in the hospital was very worn down, completely burned out. And I decided to try a little pilot study, a little experiment, where I explained energy from this perspective. And just to share with you, before I move forward, I should just explain what this symbol is. Because when we use art as a tool to educate, it becomes an opportunity to transcend language. So this medicinal mandala is an artistic expression of energy from both Western and Eastern perspectives. And Einstein is staring at the centerpiece called a vector equilibrium. This represents all of our Western science. And it actually is related to the 1996 Nobel Prize because it represents and symbolizes a perfectly balanced form of energy, pure equilibrium. At the same time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is staring at this mandala, a flower, this lotus flower, which for thousands of years have always described spiritual science, or science of connection, the science of consciousness. And I want everyone just to take a moment to appreciate that when you superimpose that vector equilibrium of perfectly balanced energy with the lotus flower, can everyone appreciate how they flow into each other? They occupy the same space. There's a particular frequency that they both harbor, they both share. Now, it's medicinal because when you actually color this, your brain waves go into that nice therapeutic calming phase. So it has that medicinal quality where you can use it as an aid, as a, kind of a silent mantra. But what's interesting is how it can be used to express energy and explain it. So again, going back to the hospital and realizing that staff needed something to help rejuvenate and trying to bring back a little bit of some passion to help them, we did a little program where I explained energy using the medicinal mandala, and I shared with them coloring utensils and designs for them to color during their break. And in the first week, I was amazed because the culture really shifted. Staff who are typically on their phones during lunch hour were now coloring and re-engaging with each other, talking with each other. And eventually, by the second week, as you can see, they started decorating the halls of our department with their artwork, which really, resonated because not only did the patients started asking questions, but now other staff members in the hospital noticed it, and then they started doing similar coloring projects. And before I knew it, this program, this idea, had rippled out into the community where now is being asked to visit schools, primary schools, secondary schools, high schools. In fact, I even did a program at the University of Waterloo for students during exams, and we got students coloring these designs and then brought back students' wishes and intentions of love and compassion to each other, and we brought them and shared them with patients. And we created this little community network. And this, all of this, these opportunities arose so organically purely by just sharing a little bit of knowledge of understanding energy and the power of love. And eventually, I was asked to do some conferences and workshops. And it was at this point I realized, wow, this is really powerful. This is something very special. And so eventually I had an opportunity to go back to India, and I thought, well, let's see how this concept would be received in India. And I had opportunities, again, to visit with students, have opportunities to visit hospitals and speak to hospital staff, and realize that this was something that was really well received. They really resonated with the message as much as those in the West. So at this point, I thought, well, how would this concept and this idea work in an area of divide, in a community where there's a lot of conflict? Because what we're talking about here is the science of interconnection and interconnectivity. So I started to visit the Middle East and spend time in Israel, particularly in some of the communities on the north between Israel and Lebanon and Israel and Syria, visiting schools, and again, introducing art. And it was fascinating because even though many of the children may not have spoken English, we were able to use the art to communicate and really help them, put their finger on the pulse as to why they felt connected as a community despite so much turmoil around them. Now, interestingly, I had opportunities to connect with even adult groups, multi-faith dialogue groups, where Christians, Jews, Muslims, everywhere were coming together, and again, sharing the art, getting their impression of how they received this conversation of oneness. And it was at this point, I thought, wow, this is something that we really need to bring forth to the world. How do we best bring this message forward? Something that's so powerful and really create so much passion with people. So finally, catching up to where we are today, I've created a educational course called the Energy Fellowship, which is essentially just discussing energy from this new perspective. It's all about the art and science of self-care, patient care, and community health. And this is an accredited program, so physicians can get their professional development credits, but really it's for everybody, all healthcare practitioners. And we even have now a program at McMaster University for elective students, so students can start taking the energy elective and also get tuned into this particular frequency. So let's now begin. I just want to share with you and introduce to you what we're talking about in the Energy Fellowship and provide you a slightly new perspective on energy. And we're going to do this by examining the current gold standard in medicine called the Biopsychosocial Model, BPS. A real fancy way to say mind, body, and spirit. Now, this has been around for about 20 years, but it's not until recently that it's really picking up steam. And just to share with you a few these are game-changing facts to show you how important this BPS model actually is. In a study of almost 5,716 middle-aged people, those with the highest self-regulation abilities were over 50 times more likely to be alive and without chronic disease 15 years later compared to those with the lowest self-regulation skills. This is huge. You're more likely to be alive without chronic disease in 15 years if you're able to self-regulate your inner landscape, your emotions. If you become mindful, you're now able to, you have this capacity to be at a much healthier level. And here, 50 times is not a small margin. And in fact, not one, but 3 separate 10-year studies, they all concluded that emotional stress was more predictive of death from cancer and cardiovascular disease than from smoking. Again, this is a game changer. If I knew this in medical school, if this was emphasized, when I think I would have come to appreciate the power of, this whole conversation much earlier, or at least it would have been on my radar. This is, again, a real game changer in how we understand and appreciate, health and wellness. And these studies showed that people who were unable to effectively manage their stress had a 40% higher death rate than non-stressed individuals. These are not small margins. Now, the red flags I want to just bring to your attention is that 60 to 80% of primary care doctor visits are related to stress, but only 3% of patients receive stress management. There's a huge gap. And one of the reasons why there is such a huge gap is because it was identified in May 2019, just before the COVID pandemic hit. In the Canadian Medical Association Journal, they published a paper that identified suicide as the only cause of mortality higher in doctors than non-doctors. And again, it's not just by a small margin. Males, they're at 40% higher. Females, it's more than double. So we really need to begin a serious conversation in the medical model to say, look, consciousness and spirituality, self-regulation, these are all pieces of the puzzle that we need to have baked into our model. not just tokenism and having, you know, a couple of lectures through the year. We need this baked into the system. So let's just dive into it a little bit. Dr. Sarah Lazar from Harvard, she showed us, her research showed that when you take people off the street, you teach them how to flex their mental muscle, some breathing techniques and some mindful techniques, it shows that 20 minutes a day, as little as 2 months time, your brain will structurally change. An MRI of your brain can show structural changes. Almost just as if you're going to the gym every day for 2 months, you'll notice that your muscles are getting leaner, getting stronger. The same thing happens in the brain. And her work specifically looked at areas related to stress and anxiety, particularly the amygdala. And this area, you know, the stress and angst, this is what holds people back, fear-based mentality. And it shows that these techniques shrinks the amygdala so that people are not in that current state of angst. They're able to, they have this higher degree of flexibility and flow with life. Now, interestingly, subsequent research now shows that other parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, which is the most evolved part of our brain, it's responsible to our higher level of thought and cognition, that part of the brain actually thickens. So here we have a process that shrinks the least evolved parts of the brain, that keeps us held back, and it thickens and promotes the more evolved parts of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, making us smarter, making us more logical. Essentially what we're saying is that these techniques help us evolve, not only as individuals, but this is what helps us evolve as a species. Now, Dr. John KabatZinn's work, for those of, I'm sure many of you have heard of him, he is a New York-based doctor that brought mindfulness really into this Western hemisphere, and he created this mindful-based stress reduction therapy, MBSR. And his research was profound because he showed that when you teach people these easy, simple mental exercises, your body actually heals faster. He was working with dermatologists and patients who had psoriasis, and half of this, they did the study where half of the group were taught specific exercises, the other half weren't. They were both, put into the UV light as therapy, and it turned out the people that were using their consciousness as an adjunctive tool to therapy, they healed 4 times faster. And this has been verified time and time again. So we know that the body is designed to thrive, and that these techniques actually boost our inherent ability to heal. Now, this is a huge conversation. There's multiple layers to it, extremely complex, as you can all imagine. But at the end of the day, let's make it very clear that these techniques modulate our genetic expression down to our chromosomal genetic level. The book of life, our genes, every verse, every gene within this book is modulated, and it turns out that these techniques will upregulate, turn on, amplify those genes that are related to positive health, but at the same time will downgrade, decrease the genetic expression of genes that are related to disease. So essentially what we're saying is that we now have the conscious ability to hack in to our biology. We have this capacity to tune in to something very deep within each of us. Now, I want to take a moment to share something really exciting, because one area that I am very interested in is the role of the heart when it comes to mindfulness and spirituality. So Dr. Roland McCready from HeartMath is really a global leader in understanding and studying psychophysiology. How does your thoughts and emotions affect your physiology? And as we all can appreciate, success really depends on 2 factors, right? Your IQ, but also your emotional intelligence. And it turns out that the heart is at the heart of emotional intelligence. So just to quickly show you a little bit of the science behind this, it turns out that Your heart rhythms encode information relating to your emotional status. Your heart rhythms encode information relating to how you feel, your emotions, your emotional energy. So for instance, the graph on the left, the red graph, this is a very irregular heart rhythm. This is called incoherence. This is what happens when you are feeling very frustrated or you're irritated, you're worried, you're angst. That negative emotion creates a very irregular heart rhythm, as opposed to being in coherence, which is the blue graph, where you can see that the heart rhythms are very sinusoidal and rhythmic in nature. This is what happens when you feel good. You feel appreciated and calm. You're in the flow of life. You're doing what makes you feel best. Your heart rhythms are in a nice rhythmic fashion. The reason why this is so important is because these rhythms are transferred up to parts of the brain. And you can imagine if your heart is in incoherence, if it's very irregular, these irregular rhythms short circuits your brain. Essentially, it's called cortical inhibition, and it affects your brain so you're unable to think. You're unable to really function at that optimal state. So think about any time you may have had an exam, you're really anxious, even 2 + 2, it will be difficult. I'm sure all of us can relate to something in our lives where the stress just prevented you from being able to think clearly. Now, on the flip side, when you're feeling in the flow of life, that nice rhythmic coherent heart rhythm is transferred to the brain, which causes what we call cortical facilitation. It optimizes your mental function, your ability to flow and to work. And the areas of the brain that's involved in and affected by these rhythms, so areas that are involved in foresight, your decision-making capacity, social awareness, your ability to self-regulate. Essentially, how you perceive the world and how you react to it is all influenced by these heart rhythms. So this is profound. And furthermore, not only are these heart rhythms affecting the way that we think and how we perceive and process information, how we react to the world around us, but it also will help synchronize all of the other biological rhythms that is going on in our physiology. All of our biological systems, right? It doesn't matter if we're talking about our respiration, our blood pressure, skin conductance, everything in our system are versions of rhythms. And when the heart gets into this nice coherent rhythm, it can actually induce coherence with all the other biological rhythms. So simply put, we're all energetic beings. And you're either going to be in one of two states, energy drainage or an energy charge. And when you're in that state of coherence, you're charging your energy. When you are in coherence, when you are feeling frustrated, you're sucking energy out of your system. Now, this is what's really exciting. We have the technology available to us that's affordable, it's accessible, and it's very convenient to actually trace and measure our coherence levels in real time. So now you can actually, if you're learning meditation or if you're working with a patient and you're trying to help them learn how to engage with their inner landscape, these devices can actually help them learn to feel that inner spaciousness. And you can actually watch your progress in real time. As a physician, you'd be able to track their progress over time and watch their coherence level shift over time as your patients incorporate this in their daily lives. So we now have these unique tools available so that we can connect with ourselves, use it as a real-time biofeedback tool, but it also as a practitioner to say, we can, start training together. We can, and track progress, objective metrics. Now, up until now, we've been really discussing the mind-body connection. So red and the yellow circles. Let's take a moment to look at the blue circle, that social circle. This social circle in the BPS model really is just another way of saying the spiritual sciences. How connected do you feel to yourself? How connected do you feel to your community, to your friends, your colleagues? How connected do you feel to something bigger than yourself? Be it the environment, be it the world, be it universal consciousness, God, Allah. It doesn't matter what it is that you feel connected to. We need a feeling of connection. And it turns out that the highest risk of death in a retirement home before COVID was feeling of isolation. And in fact, the number one cause of addiction for things that for people to get addicted to is related to a feeling of void, feeling disconnected. And the addiction is, an attempt to fill that inner space, that inner void. The blue circle is not just about, being aware that, I've got lots of friends around me, but it's really a deeper inner connection, a deeper embodiment of that feeling, that emotion of connection. And that's a very important distinction. Now, when we look at the science of how connected we actually are, it's interesting because coherence research shows that a group of people who are connected in coherence will actually induce other people into coherence. So imagine what I'm saying. Your heart, your feeling of awe and flowing in, like you're in the flow of life, that beautiful feeling can actually help induce other people into that state, even though they might not even be aware of it. Now, how is this even possible? Well, as we all know, the heart, when we study the heart, we're reading EKGs. It's electricity. This is the electrical flow within the heart. And if you remember from Physics 101, everything that has electricity, a flow, has a magnetic field, electromagnetism. So it turns out that our hearts are creating a magnetic field. Everybody on this planet has this magnetic field around them that can be measured up to at least 3 feet, if not more. And we are not only the heart, not only sending signals up to your brain and is involved in your, ability to function and your health and wellness, but you're sending these rhythms out into your environment through the magnetic field, and other people's hearts are also receiving these rhythms. And they could either kind of, start to resonate with your coherent state, or if you're really incoherent and you're really frustrated, you can also bring people down into a level of incoherence. And I'm sure many of you have had the experience where you're in morning rounds or you're at a party, somebody walks in who's just like a breath of fresh air, or you feel like, negative Ned just showed up. And you can feel the energy get sucked out of the room. What you're feeling, these vibes, we're now starting to understand on a much deeper energetic level. And the interesting thing is that the same devices that can help us learn and connect, these biofeedback tools that are measuring our own personal coherence, can now measure the social coherence and how our heart rhythms synchronize with each other through that shared space of love and intention for each other. So let me just say that again, because I think this is huge. We have technology that can now measure our shared coherent love for each other. That intention of compassion and love for each other is now an energy that's not only feeding this field of energy that we all share and are part of, but we can now measure how our rhythms begin to synchronize with each other through that love. Now, not only, as you can imagine, this is great for our, individuals' health and wellness, but what does it do to the social dynamic? Well, it turns out it's a pretty big deal. And in fact, there is, science shows us that only about 10% of communication is related to the words that you say. Everything else is nonverbal. Your tone, your volume, your body language. And our heart rhythms, our coherence, our emotions are being translated at a deep energetic level to other people, regardless of the words that we say. Now, why is this important? Because you can imagine in a workplace when communication is essential, we need to be crystal clear with each other. So look at this. An estimated 70% of workplace mistakes can be traced back to problems in communication. More specifically to medicine, a major study of 2,966 serious medical incidents found that 66%, two-thirds, 2 out of every 3 serious mistakes had a root cause of miscommunication. And we need to address this because not only, the stress and the angst not only affects our emotional status, which can really confound, communication with somebody, but when you're burned out at the end of the day, you can't even think straight. You can't communicate to a colleague who's going to do an overnight of call and really share all the pertinent, life and death issues that you need to convey in those moments when you're just exhausted, burned out, and probably emotionally distraught. That being said, it's not just in medicine, as you can imagine. And this is what I found fascinating with the School of Inspired Leadership, that Anil was bringing this science into the workspace. And he realized, not even knowing about coherence, but yet the science of spirituality and how to apply the power of the heart to creating strong leaders, to create healthy communities. This has a profound effect. When you create that open space, you are creating more harmonious relationships, healthier teams. And it turns out on a productivity level, it increases. Your meeting times shorten. It aligns your team members, and it can, get rid of the drama, get rid of all these preconceived ideas off the table, so that when you engage with each other, when you come back and you have these deep conversations, you're much more productive and you're on the same wavelength, you're on the same page. Very powerful when it comes to organizational health, this idea of social coherence. So now you can start to see how healthcare plays a part in every aspect, even in business. And it's not, this idea of social coherence, it's great, yes, in medicine we need it. In the boardroom, it would be very powerful. But even in the world, on a social health scale, this understanding has a profound effect. So this is from a research paper from 1999, and it was based on a research experiment in 1996, based in Washington, D.C. It was studying Maharishi Effect. Essentially, people coming together to Washington to create a focus of intention of love and compassion, a coherence amongst each other to influence the community around them in Washington, so that they believe that through love and intention of compassion for this community, that crime would decrease by 20%. And this would be done over 8 weeks. Now you can imagine, the police chief at this point said, you guys are crazy. But as you can see from this graph, the green line represents the coherence creating group size. And at the end of 8 weeks, almost 4,000 people showed up to Washington to focus on love and the intention of peace for the community. The brown line represents percent change in homicides, rapes, and assaults. You can see that it decreased by 23% by the end of 8 weeks. And what's not included in this diagram is that when people started to leave after 8 weeks and started to go back home, the crime rate slowly rebounded right back to baseline levels. The police chief was quoted in this research paper because he just couldn't believe it. And the fact is that it took 3 years to publish this paper, because in the peer-reviewed process, the scientists could not wrap their head as to how in the world would your thoughts affect people's behavior. How is that even possible? There had to be a mistake. There had to be an issue with the protocol. But after 3 years of intense scrutiny, they published the paper and they said, this is the real deal. We advise people to verify, repeat, and, let's make sure that this is not a one-off. And sure enough, if you Google Maharishi Effect, power of intention, there's tons of research verifying the exact same results. And, this is this was brought up. This isn't something new. Time Magazine did a whole paper, a whole article on Maharishi at the time. And in fact, here's our, a late prime minister, Trudeau, in 1975, met Maharishi while visiting Canada. And in fact, just out of, interest, here's our current prime minister, Justin Trudeau, and his father, Pierre Trudeau, and they're both yogis. They both appreciate the power of what we're talking about. And, I think we're in this very interesting, opportune time to start raising this conversation to a level of consciousness. Now, before we conclude, there's one last thing I want to talk to you about, and that is the big question as to why. Why are we designed in such a way so that our heart rhythms begin to synchronize with each other? Why are we designed like that? Now, to answer that, let's just share what Leonardo da Vinci said. Leonardo said, we just have to learn how to see, realize that everything is connected to everything else. And if we fast forward a few centuries, Nikola Tesla said, look, if you wish to understand the universe, think of energy, frequency, and vibration. To help you integrate what these two gentlemen were meaning, I want you now to take a moment and imagine. Take a nice deep breath and center yourself, and I want you to imagine on this idea. Imagine that you are on stage with me, and we are in the midst of a celebration of global oneness, a global conscious awakening. And your favorite musician, your favorite DJ, your favorite symphony is on stage playing your favorite music, and there's a crowd of 100,000 people celebrating with us in heart, in mind. And you would imagine that everybody has their own form of expression. Everyone's dancing different. But you would also notice that everybody is synchronized to the exact same beat. Now, that, my friends, is exactly what's going on in the universe. When you look at Mother Nature, I'm sure many of you have noticed that all the flowers, no matter what type of flower it is, it all has a similar rhythm to it. Everything in nature has a certain flow. In school, we learned about it. It's called Fibonacci sequence, golden ratio, sacred geometry, architecture of the universe. There's so many labels for this frequency, this divine ratio. But what is important to me is that you begin to really recognize it. And again, bringing you back to the medicinal mandala, this is the frequency that is shared between the vector equilibrium, perfectly balanced energy, and the lotus flower representing our spiritual oneness, our connectedness. And it doesn't matter where you look, from the arms of the galaxy down to our environmental patterns. Every fruit, every vegetable, anything that you're putting into your body to nourish your energetic, physical body is all dancing to the exact same rhythm. There's a ratio, a frequency that is shared throughout life. And it's not just the world around us. I can tell you, as a radiologist, I educate medical students in anatomy, and I can tell you that every bit of our anatomy, our physical frame, is dancing to this rhythm. Even at the neonatal stage, we are manifesting. We are manifestations of this rhythm. Now, it's important that you hear what I'm saying. And more importantly, that you can see this connection. And I want you to really think about it. Take some time to contemplate on this concept, because right now society is going nuts. Because there is so much fake news. There is so much falsehoods and lack of accountability right now in the world that we need to recenter ourselves with truth. And when the opportunity arises so that we can actually visualize it for ourselves, And when we hear it, you really resonate with truth. You can feel it in your body. I'm sure many of you know is truth. You don't have to take my word for it. Particularly now when you can take 5 minutes and learn a specific, a little mental push-up, and you can embody it. You can feel that something is real. But here we have the opportunity for people to realign with a new narrative. Help us understand ourselves at a deep level. And it's such a deep level because what we're identifying, when your mind recognizes somebody's face that meets this particular ratio, you're going to perceive them as being attractive in the world. Even how we perceive attractiveness is based on this particular divine frequency, this ratio. So what we're saying is that we're taking what resides at the level of the subconscious mind and we're bringing it to a level of conscious awareness. This becomes a tool. It becomes so powerful to learn and understand ourselves at a deeper level and to understand our relationship to each other at a much deeper level. And essentially, we are reframing, we're redefining who and what we are as individuals, but also as a collective. This frequency, this ratio is like Mother Nature's fingerprint. We've identified this fingerprint. It's all around us. We are a part of this fingerprint. And let's, look, at the end of the day, you and me, I'm here in Canada, my skin might look different, but be known that our DNA, our genetics, is 99.9% genetically identical. If we were flying in the stratosphere of Mother Earth right now, essentially we are all genetically identical. We're all part of the whole. And it's this expanding perspective of understanding life that is essential in an understanding ourselves and how to unlock our peak potential. Life is a petri dish of cells, a colony of cells, or it could be a colony of cells creating a human sentient being, or perhaps it's a superorganism called the planet. But yet we are all part of this spectrum of life. And this perspective is essential in this gold standard of understanding health and wellness through the Biopsychosocial Model, BPS. We need to feel like we're part of something greater than ourselves. And it's this narrative, it's this fingerprint that allows people to realign, reframe, reconnect, get re-energized with a new narrative that helps us understand our interconnection and at the same time allows us to celebrate our individuality. Now, at the end of the day, we're living in an illusion right now. We live in an illusion that we think we're separate from each other. This is what's creating disease. The more separate we feel, the more disease it creates. And it's not just diseased individuals, but we're seeing diseased communities right now. The social fabric is being ripped apart because of a false narrative, an idea that we're separate. Extremism is on a rise, unprecedented scale. And again, because we are so out of sync with reality. And again, by understanding our own self and our relationships to each other, it reframes the conversation that even how to approach the extremism that's erupting around the world. The fact that we feel so disconnected to the planet allows companies, carte blanche to destroy the environment. It doesn't make sense how we are living the world in a way that we are today. And I'm sure many of you, I don't sing to the choir, I know that all of you feel the same. And this becomes now a new opportunity, a new way of reframing who and what we are as individuals and as a community. So in Next Gen Health, this is exactly what we believe in. I've created a social enterprise focusing on creating social impact with a mission. We will create healthy minds and thriving communities through the power of the arts and technology. And by using the arts to educate people on the power of the heart and how that relates to individuals and our connectedness is key to all of this. And really, we are now looking at an opportunity to create a more conscious healthcare model, one that is as much local as it is global, and local down to the micro scale being you, the individual, and by your inner awakening and your connectedness and creating balance between mind, body, and spirit, it allows you to not only create that deep connection for yourself to unlock your peak potential, but it's the pathway to create deeper heart-to-heart connections with others. So, how in the world are we going to do this? Well, this is the last little bit. Radical art. So, radical art is a radiologist's approach to educate, heal, and inspire. And in fact, it also stands for Radiologist Developed Autonomic Nervous System Rewiring Therapy. Bit of a mouthful. So hence radical art. But before I describe what radical art, let me just point out something interesting about art. Art is all about perceived value. For instance, this digital image, CryptoPunk 4156, does not even exist in the real world. This is a piece of art as a digital file. And we are entering a new age of the digital world where people are buying digital files like this, the CryptoPunk, as what we call NFTs, like something in the realm of this whole cryptocurrency. But needless to say, the perceived value of this piece of art earned this artist $1.25 million. Imagine. Now, I'm not saying this is not a beautiful piece of art. In some people's eyes, I'm sure it's mind-blowing. But for me, I just, I'm thinking $1.25 million, really? I know how I could help use that money. We could do a lot of good with $1.25 million. But my point being is this. I believe that the arts, when you encode knowledge into art, that knowledge and that art becomes extremely valuable. The art becomes extremely precious. And I want to use art to not only share my story of heart, but I want to use it to explain energy and explain the science of heart through this art. The artwork will be sold and auctioned off to help buy heart sensors, biofeedback tools that we can now donate to our communities, donate to schools and hospitals, marginalized communities. And we can create healthier minds, creating resilience and appreciation of our whole. And we can begin to witness this global, conscious, coherent community emerge. We can now begin to witness this global coherence, almost like this energy grid that's coming online, that's powered by love and attention through our hearts. And the art is so powerful because we can engage youth using language that they are inspired by. We can engage with them and show them their superpowers and really get them excited and empower them with not only new skills for health and wellness, but how to help create a healthier tomorrow. And when using art and connecting with musicians, we will also be creating musical scores. We're going to create conscious music to help us breathe life into a conscious and coherent global community. We'll spark a celebration. And don't get me wrong, look, the trend is already started. In fact, last night, Jennifer Lopez put on a concert for global citizenship. People in the mainstream and artists, they have huge platforms that they want to use to bring about health and wellness and peace to the world. Imagine when they get tuned into this frequency. Imagine how their participation in the conversations help create a conscious eruption in the world. Now, what's interesting about this art is that every conversation and program, I create art to really capture the theme, capture the moment, and also use it to help share a new narrative of this emerging global consciousness. And with people's engagement and participation, by providing people with heart cards, where you can color your medicinal mandala, contemplate on this oneness, really reinforce these new neurons as you begin to appreciate this new perspective of energy, color the medicinal mandala and share your intentions, share your love, share your insights, your vision for a brighter future, and share it on social media. Tag Next Gen Health, and then I can now share your stories and your intention in these pieces of art that will help us share the story of a global community, raise money to create mental health resilience programs, providing the tools that will allow us to stitch the social fabric back together. So I will be providing Dr. Ranjan a link. So any of you that wants to download a heart card, share your thoughts with me, please, I invite you to. I'll be happy to re-engage in conversations, share this moment in art with you. And all I can say is it's time. It's all aboard. This is an opportunity that everybody now has to use intention of love, their knowledge, their new insights towards creating real change. For those of you, and the last thing I'll say is those of you who are interested in professional development, wanting to learn and dive deeper into the science of heart and really engage with the body, and identify strategies that you can use it for not only yourself, but with the community as part of not only local community health, but as part of this bigger global connection, I'd be very happy to connect with you. Here's my email, and I'm sure Dr. Ranjan can post it in the caption. And for any of you that are involved in clinics or organizations, again, there's lots of opportunities to learn how to engage and use the science of heart to create healthier communities. So with that all said, I'll leave one last quote that I think is just so perfect for this moment in time, this conversation. Einstein says that future medicine will be the medicine of frequencies. And I believe this is exactly where we are today. So I am going to press the pause button. I think I've spoken quite a bit, and I'm happy, Dr. Ranjan, if any thoughts, questions.
Beautiful thought, Dr. Mitch. This is a very creative way, very unique way to share ourselves as well as create a beautiful community. So I will float this message with our group, and many people are listening to us right now. So we will start collaborating on this project.
Excellent. Excellent. I think it would be really fun and very powerful to periodically, maybe, every 6-8 weeks, we come back and we have conversations with some of your panelists. And we can engage in conversation and capture those conversations with the heart cards and create pieces of art that can capture that moment, capture that energy, and again, create further awareness and use it to help support communities and create a new local is global social science research initiative all through these devices. And it really creates a foundation for community health.
There is one question. I don't know if it's connected with the topic or not. BPS model, the role of BPS model in Parkinson or in different disease like that.
Well, the BPS model, ultimately improves everything. Even, it's been shown that mindfulness can help with Parkinson patients, either, through cognitive abilities, their physical abilities. It's kind of like, I think of it as just one big umbrella. And there are so many kind of pieces to it, like what we eat, changing your diet to a healthy diet so that you're serving the physical body, the physical energy, which is part of the BPS model, is, also has been shown to profoundly affect prognosis in Parkinson patients. Meditation techniques can also improve. So, I don't have a specific examples, to point to, but absolutely, as a general whole, the BPS model is something that affects every single, disease.
Parkinson patient don't need to do meditation. By doing art, creative side of fellow will start expanding. So it will decrease the stress and it will bring the brain in harmony.
I haven't seen an actual study when it comes to art and Parkinson's. Not to say that there isn't, but I can tell you from the anecdotal experience from having physiotherapists and recreational therapists at our hospital use coloring. They were sharing these mandalas with patients. Many of them had closed head injuries, post-stroke, and even addictions. They really took to it, and some of them, if it wasn't improving just their physical ability, it definitely, they found, affected their kind of mental capacity, because it kind of changed their mood. It kind of brought them to appreciate and got their attention onto something else. And it's perhaps hard to identify exactly what it is, because there's so many aspects to it. The fine coloring, the fine motor, aspects to it. There's that frequency of the mandala that we know is, connecting to something on a subconscious level. And perhaps even just something kind of new being presented to them, so that they're not so focused on just their disease. All of these things, can layer on to each other. And I feel like what is happening is that because there's so much overlap between mind, body, and spirit, sometimes it's very hard to point at one thing when it's really it's all layered on top of each other in so many ways. And like Da Vinci said, everything is connected to everything else. So hence stress and angst will affect Parkinson's, will affect people's health even in general.
So any of our physician friend, would you like to ask any more question? Dr. Mitch, can you share a little bit more about HRV, heart rate variability?
So heart rate variability has been kind of known to the medical field for decades. And in fact, Olympic athletes have been using HRV since the 70s for peak performance training. And what it means is that when you track your interbeat intervals, when you really zoom up on your EKG and you measure the intervals between every single beat, you'll notice that it's slightly different between beats. Even though you might say, oh, somebody's in sinus rhythm, it looks nice and regular, there's still fractions of a second difference between each beat. And when you look at that differences, either it's slowing down or it's speeding up in the interbeat intervals, this is an indication of the autonomic nervous system. Your sympathetic system is slightly being activated, and then parasympathetic will get activated. And what happens is, if you're frustrated, it's almost like when you're driving your car. If, your sympathetic's your gas, parasympathetic's your brake pedal, and you get frustrated, you're going to slam both feet on, use both feet at the same time and press the gas and the brake. And you imagine driving a car like that. It's jerky. You're, ruining the car, and you're really, really inefficient, using up energy, using up gas. But when you're feeling good and you're in that coherent state, you'll see that the heart will do a run where it will start to speed up a little bit for a few beats, and then it'll start to slow down for a few beats. Then it speeds up again, and then it starts to slow down again. So what's happening is that you're now driving your car with one foot. You're on the gas, take it off. Now you're going to press on the brake. Back to the gas, back to the brake. And it creates a coordinated fashion so that your heart rate variability becomes very nice and rhythmic, called coherence. And that coherent signal is very powerful. It goes to the brain, to the thalamus, affecting prefrontal cortex and everything else that we were talking about. But it also can induce, like pitching forks. You hit one, if it's at the same frequency, the second one will start to resonate with it. Our biological rhythms act similarly, and our systems begin to synchronize with each other, putting us in that optimal physiologic energetic state where if you're feeling frustrated, you can flex your mental muscle in the moment, get you to stop the energy leak, and that'll put you into energy charge. That's the science of resilience. That's what we're talking about, hacking our biology. And certain techniques, certain meditations, a lot of people feel like, oh, you just have to sit in the corner for 20 minutes, and just sit in silence. Whereas other techniques can be used in the heat of the moment and connect to your heart. I could be doing it right now. I mean, you wouldn't know. I could be connecting my focused thought on my heart, channeling energy to you in the community, and it helps me feel like I'll stay in that flow of life. If I get nervous and I'll start to stumble, I know that my heart's out of rhythm. So boom, I can connect back to getting grounded to heart. So once we understand the body and how the energies work with each other, we can start to use it, hack into it. And it's essential that doctors really get tuned into it. And so because they need it themselves, but also how can we create that deep heart-to-heart connection with patients? Because patients need that. They need it for their own health, but they also need to feel connected because their prognosis is correlated to how connected they feel to us as practitioners. Oh, I think you're muted, Dr. Ranjan.
So how can we, that's what I understood. How do we create coherence in the patients, in managing patients, treating patients? Do you think coloring that that creates coherence? And
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. Continue, sir.
Oh, well, that's a great question. And there's lots of ways that people can create coherence. I think the coloring may not in itself create coherence, the act of coloring, but it gets them tuned into the possibility. And eventually, if they use that time to do certain techniques, then yes. So they can induce themselves into coherence. Patients, one of the things that I do in the accredited program is to teach a very simple technique. I call it the laser protocol. It's LSRR. It's the 3 phases to induce coherence and to feel connected to your patient. The first is we lock on to the energy, then we learn how to synchronize with it, and then we radiate and receive, and you create that deep heart-to-heart connection. And this is something that can be implemented in the beginning of every patient interaction. It could be used in the beginning of every morning rounds with your staff, with your clinic. And in fact, I saw in the chat somebody was asking about law and in the boardroom. It's so easy to implement because once people get tuned into this conversation, then people feel like, well, yeah, I guess it's really worth taking that 5 minutes. If my prognosis will improve, or if, hey, as a team, we're going to get out of this meeting faster, let's connect and let's tune into each other. So I think, this is one way. I think there's lots of ways getting people tuned into nature. Some people love to go out in nature and walk, and they feel that connection. That in itself creates, can create that coherent state, that flow of life, that sense of awe. So it really depends on individuals, but I think the very first step, half the battle, is sparking interest, getting people tuned into a conversation, and creating this new framework, a foundation that we can all begin to use when we talk about energy and energy medicine, so that we can start integrating what we have as the best of the West and integrate ancient spiritual wisdom. And, there's a whole, the whole big pharma and that whole conversation, we've gone so far down a certain path. We've lost that the art of medicine has been lost in translation. And I feel like now we're at a pivotal point where we need to get back to basics and kind of reconnect to our truth, our humanity. If we deepen our own human experience, we can now bring a deeper human experience to our healthcare model and to each other.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ranjan, I couldn't hear you. You're on mute.
Can we listen some music on your guitar?
You want some music?
Yes. To create more coherence.
A little bit of coherence. Okay, I'll play a little something. This was not on the plan. I used music to help, kind of get me in tune for little talks. But so here's a little musical score. What would you say? I beg you, baby, what I'm asking you today. You had just one single chance, a single chance to play. If you saw tomorrow before today, beg you, baby, would you help us change our crazy ways? Or would we stay the course? I say, would we rage the great war? Or take a stand in the sand, feed the hungry with an outstretched loving hand. Let us all unite, put an end to this crazy global plight. But those who say that the life, it's got to be this way, you liar, I beg you, look down, your pants are on fire. Oh, tonight, step up inside. Together we all do shine. I sing, we sing, yes, in the dead of night, to awaken the whole wide world tonight. What would you say? I beg you, baby, whoa, I'm asking you again today. You had just one second chance, or one more play. Is it so hard for you to simply see that the fate brought you here now to sing with me? You think like Einstein, yeah, or you were woven in the fabric of space-time. Oh, you and me, oh, we connected in this crazy quantum dream. So stare into the light, oh, in the oneness is where we find ourselves tonight. Oh, stare into the light, hide. Oh, stare into the light, hide. Stare into the light, hide. Stare into the light, hide. Oh, tonight, yes, step up inside. Together we all do shine. I sing, we sing, yes, in the dead of night, to awaken whole wide world tonight.
This is true heart coherence, Dr. Mitch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Music ensure heart coherence. That's for sure.
It is. There's so much we could chat about around the power of music. I mean, what I was experiencing, it was part of my healing. It helped me connect to my heart, helped me even find my heart. I didn't even know I had a heart before any of this. And music, even before coming to visiting India for the first time, something inside had awakened. Something turned on, and I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't know what was going on. I thought I was, at a certain point, thought I was losing my marbles because of my experiences. And it wasn't until in India where I learned so much, and there was a language for it, there was a science behind it that I could, grab onto and tune in, ground myself, and use this information to really find the best version of myself, reinvigorate myself, and find that passion, and just want to share it with as many people as possible. And music was something that changed everything. And what I found very fascinating is that on that first trip, I also found out that music, in the ancient wisdom of the East, that music is a tool to expand consciousness, to expand your inner space. And what I really loved when we're watching Dr. Ibn Alexander's talk, it gave me goosebumps when I heard him say that in his near-death experience, there was a music, there was a song, he said frequency was key to bringing him to the highest level of consciousness. And when I heard that, immediately I felt such truth to it, because there was something that I was experiencing I can't explain other than just to say that this is so real. And you don't even have to take my word for it. You can practice 5 minutes, take 2 minutes, begin a meditation practice. Don't take my words for it. Don't listen to a critic, but go and do it. Try it. Because I believe, health and wellness is not in a pill bottle. And if everyone's looking for that handout, you don't have time, 5 minutes for your own self, nobody's going to have time for you. And this all, hopefully we can share through music, through art, this whole message, and really begin to realign.
Thank you, Dr. Mitch. Thank you very much. Share that mandala which we have to draw and we have to share on our social media. And we will ask our friends, our participants, our members to color those mandalas and tag you Next Gen Health on social media.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I love to come back. I love to come back and we'll have a radical art conversation. We'll talk about consciousness. We'll do some coloring. Maybe we'll play some music, and we'll have conscious conversations that will just ripple into the social consciousness of our communities and really make big change. So thank you so much for this opportunity. It was absolutely a blessing to share with you.
Yeah. Dr. Sandeep, any final words?
It's a really mesmerized session, Dr. Ranjan and Dr. Mitch. Actually, I was really mesmerized by your energy and the way of your presentation. And the things which connect us are two things. I am also a big fan of HeartMath. I have the software of HeartMath. I'm using with my clients that software. And second thing is I am also a big fan of music. When I'm sitting here, I am playing this kalimba. Always because there are few things which I can. This is just coherence. We can say that, and today's session was really, really amazing, and we're looking forward for more sessions from you.
Excellent. I look forward to sharing. I love hearing that. Thank you. Your music and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Ranjan?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.